So you want to become an Android app developer? Well, then you need to know how to use RecyclerViews because they are super important. They are there in almost every relevant application that there is, because very often there is more data than you can display in one screen, so you need to swipe. And in this video, you are going to learn everything that you need to know about RecyclerViews, how to create your own custom layouts, and how to get the data to be displayed in your RecyclerView, which is basically a scrollable view. Welcome to Android Friday on tutorials.eu. My name is Dennis Panuta, and in this video you are going to learn something about Android. But as you can see, we are teaching other topics around programming as well on a weekly basis. Now, please leave a like for the YouTube algorithm as well as a sub for yourself, because you're going to profit from it. All right, now let's get back to the video. I hope you'll enjoy it. All right, so what are RecyclerViews? Because we need to understand what a RecyclerView is before we can go further, right? So first of all, it's a flexible view for displaying a large data set in a limited window. So for example, you're using Facebook, and in Facebook you have a bunch of data. So all of your friends and all of the sites that you liked have updated their posts. And Facebook decides based on an algorithm what it wants to show you. And then each time that you scroll, it needs to load the data that it wants to display to you in advance, but then it will display the data in a certain format, and this format is inside of a RecyclerView. So basically this whole scroll view that you're using is the RecyclerView, but then you have individual RecyclerView items that you can then display the data in. And that's what we're going to build in this video. So it's essentially a view group of containers called ViewHolders, which populate a particular item. So there is an extensive RecyclerView class. If you want to check it out in the documentation, you can learn all the good stuff about it. There's a lot to learn about RecyclerViews. So you can see here, this is the developer's documentation, a bunch to read, as you can see. So if you want to spend a good night reading and falling asleep quite quickly, that is the right reading material for you. Now, why are we even using RecyclerViews? Well, the thing is, in the past we had something called list view or grid view. So list views were used to create lists, and grid views were used to create grids. Well, who would have expected that? But the problem with those was that they weren't very efficient. And that's why RecyclerViews came in, because they are basically a combination of list views and grid views, but in an even more efficient way. So if we look at this image here, you can see that this RecyclerView app has a bunch of items. For example, it has an image, then a text. All right, so this is one item within the RecyclerView, which means basically one item within the list. But now let's say we want to decide to make this a grid format. Well, in the past, we would have to use a completely different class, and it wouldn't be as efficient and all of that. But now the beauty is it's just really one line of code that we would need to change, and the whole format changes. But not just that, it's also way more resource efficient, because it reuses old items, so to speak, as soon as they're not visible anymore. So as soon as they are outside of the viewport of your application, they will be then reused for the new data that you want to display. So basically those individual items are view holders, which are connected via an adapter to the actual data set. So this data set can be very flexible. It could be whatever kind of data you have. For example, data from the web, data from a database in the web or in the cloud, as it is for Facebook, for example. So this data set communicates with the adapter, which then communicates with the view holders. A RecyclerView consists of multiple components, and the most important one is the layout manager. Now, the cool thing is you can tell the layout manager how it's supposed to look. So for example, you can use the linear layout manager that will position items to look like in a standard list view. So if you just want to scroll up and down, that's the right layout for you. Or the grid layout manager positions items in a grid format similar to a grid view. And then there is also the staggered grid layout manager, which positions terms in staggered grid format, so they're on top of each other. So if you want to use this kind of format, you can use staggered grid layout managers. Now, the thing is, each time that we implement a recycler view, we need to have those four things. We need to have a list of data objects to work with. Then we need an XML file for the appearance of our items. Then we need the adapter as well as a view holder to populate the UI view from the XML item file that we just created in step 2. So these 4 steps are always required when you want to work with a recycler view. And yeah, let's basically get started and build that in Android Studio. Therefore, we're going to start with an empty activity, and I'm going to call this one RecyclerView Demo. Then you can select the language. I'm going to use Kotlin for this, and the minimum SDK being Android 5.0 Lollipop is totally fine. So just click Finish for the project to load. Once your Gradle is loaded, you can get started. So the first thing that we need to do is to go to our build.gradle and make sure that we have a certain dependency. So we need to add the dependency. Make sure that you also sync the file once you made the changes, so that you now can go ahead and use material classes. Now we have this main activity class by default, right? As well as this activity main XML by default. Well, what I want to add now is a recycler view. Now, of course, you could go ahead and just drag in the recycler view, such as you can see here. Alternatively, you can, of course, also go into the code and add the recycler view from here. So let's just add it with the designer real quick. So I'm going to get rid of this hello world, and then I'm going to drag in the recycler view. And as you can see, it takes the whole width and height automatically. Now there is a little error here, so let's look at it. It says missing constraint in constraint layout. In order to fix that, you can click on those little bubbles here, and that will automatically generate the constraint layouts. If you want to look at it at the code, you can see that it added those 4 lines. If you checked it before, you will see that this is actually the difference. So it says constraint bottom to bottom, end to end of parent. It's basically saying that it's going to take the whole width and height of the parent, which is in our case the complete screen size. Now what I don't like is that it automatically also generated a width and a height, and I will just say, okay, please make sure that you match the parent in terms of width. So just take the whole width as well as the whole height. So also match parent, which is just going to make sure that those constraints are really taken care of. Now this resource activity main XML is under our resources folder and then in the layout folder. So you can see this is the file. In this same folder, I'm going to create a new layout resource file. And I'm going to give it the name item_custom_row. And the root element should not be a constraint layout this time, but I'm going to use a linear layout because linear layouts are quite simple to code, and it's a lot easier to code them rather than drag and dropping them and then having to clean up afterwards. So I'm just going to use a linear layout here, and I have prepared some code. Now let's quickly look over it. So we're using this linear layout. Then we have this namespace called app, which is res auto, and this will allow us to use this app here, which gives us a corner radius and a card elevation for our card view. So if you look at it from a design point of view, you can see now this whole thing, this whole item that we have here is this card. And this card has a little elevation which creates a little shadow around it, and it will be rounded, even though unfortunately here in our designer we cannot see it, but we will see it once we are in the app. So this corner radius creates this little radius or this little rounded shape at the corners. Then we have a little bit of a padding, a layout margin of 5 density pixels, as well as a layout height that will only be as high as the content requires, and the width will take the whole width of the screen. And then we have this ID card view item, which basically is an ID for this card view so that we can communicate with it via code later on in our main activity.kt or in our Kotlin code in general. So you can see inside of this card view, I have a linear layout with an image view and a text view. So this linear layout is basically only there to make sure that this image view as well as this text view are next to each other's and not on top of each other as it would be by default. So we're using this linear layout to say, okay, please make sure that the orientation is horizontal, and then we have this 50 density pixel width and height image, as well as we have this text view, which makes sure that we have a little bit of a text which is bold with 18 as the font size or text size, a little bit of margin, and that it's black text. Now for the tools, it is called item. So if you go to the designer, you can see here it says item, even though it will be a different text for us once we actually start implementing that. All right, now let's go to our main activity, because we need a data set. Because what we have now is the RecyclerView in our design. We have a specific item, so we have defined how an item inside of this list will look like. And now we need the data to display. And in order to display some data, I'm just going to create this little function here, which is going to be getItemsList. It's going to return an array list of strings. And basically we create a new array list here of strings, which is empty. And then we run a for loop, which will just add 15 items to our list here. And those items will be called item 1, item 2, item 3, and so forth. So we keep it super simple here. Of course, this data could be from somewhere else. It could be data from the web. It could be data from an XML file, from a JSON file. From wherever you have the data, you can use it pretty much in the same way. And that is the beauty of it, because we don't need to rewrite the whole code if we just have a different data set. We just need to make sure that the data set is plugged in at the right spot, and that's it. Okay, now we need an adapter, because you maybe recall that we had ViewHolders, adapters, and the data set. So we have the data set already, we have the adapter, and we also have the ViewHolder to a certain degree already. And as you see, we need a data objects list, as we have just created. We need an XML file for the item, which we already created, and now we need to create the adapter. Hey, and by the way, if you like this video, then you will definitely love my complete Android and Kotlin masterclass. You can find the link in the description and you'll get a huge discount. And in this course, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about Android app development. It's a 45-hour long course, and I can tell you there's a lot of love in it and a lot of good content. And at the end, there is a huge project, really from start to finish, because that's what everyone was asking for. So I decided to create this project, and it's like a 15-hour mammoth. But in this one, you're going to learn really everything from start to finish of creating an application such as Trello. So using Firebase, using RecyclerViews, as you will learn in this video, and of course a lot more. APIs, Google Maps, cameras, well, everything that you can think of when it comes to Android app development. So if you want to become a real app developer, definitely check out that course. So let's go ahead and create it. Therefore, you can create a new folder if you really want to make it clean. So this one will be called adapters. All right, inside of adapters, you would then go ahead and create a new Kotlin file, which will be a Kotlin class. And you call that class item adapter. So I'm going to overwrite this whole thing, of course, because, well, I don't want to waste your time and type all of that in manually. So I'm just going to paste it in and explain every single step along the way. All right, so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we import R. So here you can see it creates issues otherwise. So once we import it, eu.tutorials.recyclerview demo.r, this error will disappear. Then when it comes to an item adapter class, it's always the same structure because it inherits from RecyclerView.adapter, which is an item adapter.ViewHolder. So the first thing that you need to do for an adapter is to make sure that it inherits from RecyclerView.adapter item adapter.ViewHolder. Okay, so here this colon indicates that it is inheriting. Then you pass in the context as well as the items that you want to pass. And in our case, the items will be an array list of strings. Because if we look at it, this is an array list of strings, and we're going to pass in our list of strings here. Then we need some predefined methods. So the onCreateViewHolder, this method is called as soon as the viewholder is created. So as soon as it is visible in our application. And this is a default method. As you can see, we are overriding it. And basically we are saying, please use our item custom row layout, which is this item custom row layout which we just created. So this cart view item that we created just a couple of minutes ago. The rest is pretty much the same every single time in most cases. So we're just saying, okay, inflate from context and inflate our layout with, for now, the ViewGroup parent that is passed to us by default. Okay, now we need to bind the ViewHolder. So we have this onBind ViewHolder method, which gets past this ViewHolder as well as the position of the item that we're looking at. So basically, if we have a list of 10 items, then the position will start at 0. That will be the first item in the list, so at the very top. Then the second item in the list will be at position 1, and so forth. And what we say is we want to create this variable called items, which will get the item's position. And if you were wondering where this items comes from, well, it comes from all the way up here. So this is the items list that is passed to this item adapter that we have here. All right. So then we just say, okay, inside of this holder, we want to use tvitem.text, and we want to set it to whatever the item that we are currently looking at for the position that we're looking at is. So if we look at this one here, so for the first entry, it would be item 1. Okay, so we say item 1 will be our first entry, and it will be the text for TV item. So what is TV item? Well, TV item is something that we have in our class ViewHolder that is at the bottom of our item adapter. Okay, so we have this class ViewHolder, which inherits from RecyclerView ViewHolder, and we just say, okay, we have this value called TV item, this variable, which we get from view.tvItem name. So TV item name, where does that come from? Well, that is something that we created here. It's this text view, which we called exactly like that. So we called it TV item name inside of our item custom row XML file. So that's something that we did. And then we said, okay, for the cart view item, we want to use view.cartViewItem. Okay, so if we go back here, you can see it's this ID, it's cart view item. So basically at this point, so in this class ViewHolder, you could now go ahead and add all of the elements. For example, if we have this image view, which we don't have an ID for yet because we're always using the same image, but let's say you would get the images from the database, then you would also give this image view an ID, and you would then also define it inside of this class ViewHolder. So however many UI elements you want to have inside of your ViewHolder, that's what you would define in here as well as in here. Okay, so they're connected to each other. All right, let's scroll up a little bit again. So this is this holder.tvitem.text. As I said, so we say this item that we have there, please assign the text to it. And then we have a little check here. We just say, okay, if the position is even, then please go ahead and set the background color of the cart view item to be color light gray. Now, of course, we need to define this color in our colors resource file. So if you go to values here, you will find this colors.xml file. And here I'm going to define those two colors. So color white as well as color light gray. And these are the hexadecimal values for those colors. All right. So, or it's the hex code, so to speak. All right. So now the arrow disappears and we have color light gray as well as color white. And now we can use those. So every even position will be light gray and every odd position will be white. And that's everything that we're saying here. And then we have one last method that we need to override, and you can see it's this fun get item count, which will return an integer, which basically returns the size of items that we have inside of our items array list. So if we look at it, the items array list that is passed to us, well, with this method, we get the amount of entries that we have in this list. So if we look at it here in our main activity, you can see that it will contain 15 entries because we use this for loop to go from 1 to 15 to create 15 items. Now there's just one thing left to do, and that is to connect the RecyclerView to the adapter. And in order to do that, we need to create our RecyclerView, and we need to say which layout manager we want to use for it. In order to do that, we need to add these lines of code here. So first of all, we need to make sure that we set the layout manager of our RecyclerView items. So what is this RecyclerView items? Well, it's our, if we look at our activity main here, it's this RecyclerView. So I need to give it an ID here. So Android ID, and I'm going to set that to RecyclerView items. So let me save that file and go back to our main activity, and you can see this error disappears. So basically I'm saying that the layout manager that I would like to use for my RecyclerView that we created in our activity main, which is basically this list here, or this list holding container, for that one I want to use the linear layout manager. And this is just one type of layout manager. As I said, there is also the grid layout manager as well as the stack layout manager. So we have multiple options here. All right, and then I'm just saying, okay, well, the item adapter, which is our item adapter class, so we need to import it here, which is this item adapter class, which we just created. That item adapter should be using this context of our main activity, because the main activity has a context, as well as it should use this get items list in order to pass some data to it. So this get items list is basically this function we used here, which gives us back this list of 15 items in it, because we go from 1 to 15. So this is where you pass the data in, and that's a cool thing. So if you get data from somewhere else, you would just have to replace this part here, and that's pretty much it. Of course, the data has to be in the right format. So if the data is in a different format, you would need to then adjust your item adapter accordingly. And then finally, you just set the adapter of your RecyclerView items RecyclerView, which is this RecyclerView here. So basically this one here, you make sure that it's the item adapter that you just created. And once you run it, you can see that this is the list view, or in our case RecyclerView, that we created. So you can scroll around, and these are the 15 items that we have here. What you can see is that they have different background colors, so gray for odd numbers and white for even numbers. So what if you want to scroll towards the side or horizontally instead of vertically? Well, beautifully enough, it is achieved quite easily. So here in the linear layout manager, you not only need to pass in the context, but also the style that you want to use. So linear layout manager, horizontal, and then you need to pass in some flags, and I'm just gonna, or this reverse layout, and I'm just gonna set that to false. All right. So actually at this point, we don't need the project, so we can see the code all together. So let me rerun that. So what you can see here is that we can now basically go ahead and say, all right, let's create an item that will take the whole screen size, and we're not scrolling vertically, but we're scrolling horizontally. All right. So now let's say you want to have a grid view instead. Now it's also achieved quite easily. So instead of using a linear layout manager, we can just go ahead and use a grid layout manager. So here you would just say grid layout manager. Now, of course, you need to be careful with what you're passing. So you're passing the context as well as the span count. So how many columns do you want to have in your grid layout manager? So let me rerun that. And then we can see that now we have this grid layout here. So it was achieved quite easily, as you can see. Now, of course, if you have a lot more items, then you could still scroll. So let me add a little bit more items here, or some more items. Now it's going to be 30. So there we are. Now you can still scroll, but you have 2 columns now. If you wanted to have 3 columns, well, you could do that as well, even though it would look a little tricky because we don't have much space. Well, it still works. Now let's say you want to have different types here. So you don't only want to have these kind of items that we have here, where the image is always on the left hand side and the text is always on the right hand side, but you would like to have a different appearance for your list items. Well, then you are talking about different view types, and we're going to implement different view types now. So the first thing we need to do is go back from Grid Layout Manager, because I want to make sure that I'm using a linear layout manager here, and I'm going to keep it simple for this one. So the context will just be this. All right, so I went back to the code that we had before, where this was just a linear layout with this context. Then I'm going to go ahead and create another layout. So here, new layout resource file, and I'm going to call this one item underscore another underscore custom row, and it should be a linear layout here as well. So I'm going to use linear layout instead. Okay, and this will be the code that I'm going to use. So I have another card view. This time I'm changing the linear layout orientation, so now it's vertical instead of horizontal as it was before. So if you look at this design, you can see this is how an item will look like now. So we have an image, and underneath we have the text. So it's not next to it, but it's underneath it. Okay, so that's what we're going to achieve by using the orientation. In this case, it's the orientation vertical. Now, in order for this to work in a clean manner, we are going to require data models. And of course, I could go ahead and create a new package here, but for this time, I'm going to keep it simple. So I'm just going to create a new Kotlin file, which I'm going to call data model, which will be a class. And this one will be super simple. So it's a very basic data class that we're using here, which I'm going to call data model, and it's going to require an item name as well as the view type, which is an integer. Okay, so we are going to use two view types, view type 1 and view type 2, and this data model is going to take care of the handling of the data. Hey, and by the way, if you like this video, then you will definitely love my complete Android and Kotlin masterclass. You can find the link in the description and you'll get a huge discount. And in this course, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about Android app development. It's a 45-hour-long course, and I can tell you there's a lot of love in it and a lot of good content. And at the end, there is a huge project, really from start to finish, because that's what everyone was asking for. So I decided to create this project, and it's like a 15-hour mammoth. But in this one, you're going to learn really everything from start to finish of creating an application such as Trello. So using Firebase, using RecyclerViews, as you will learn in this video, and of course, a lot more. APIs, Google Maps, cameras, well, everything that you can think of when it comes to Android app development. So if you want to become a real app developer, definitely check out that course. So if you want to use a data model instead of just using a string array list as we have done before, you need to be very careful, because now you need to go to your item adapter, which we created before. It's inside of our adapters folder here, this item adapter, and now it's not going to take a string, but it should take a data model. So this data class that we just created. Now, once you do that, you can see you get an error here, because it's now complaining that item is not going to work, because item is not a string anymore, but it's a data model. So it's a data class, as we can see here. So it doesn't accept it as it was before. So we need to make a change here. We need to make sure that our item is going to be based on the holder. So now we need to make sure that this is not just a view holder that we're passing here, but we are actually passing RecyclerView.ViewHolder. Because what we're also going to do in our item adapter, now we don't use item adapter.viewHolder, but we are using RecyclerView.ViewHolder instead. And why is that? Well, because we now can have two view holders. Okay, so let's go all the way down here. So you might recall that we created this class ViewHolder here at the bottom. Well, now we need to have another class which will take care of the ViewHolder, which look differently, because this was perfectly fine for our item custom row, but now we have this item another custom row, which is different. So it's using different ID names, and that's why just going ahead and using this ID that we used before in our item adapter, which was view TV item name, is not going to cut it anymore. So now we need to make sure that we are actually creating another class here, which will take care of this item another custom row. So I'm going to call this one another ViewHolder, and it's also going to inherit from RecyclerView.ViewHolder. It's also going to require a view, but now it's not going to use TV item, but it's going to use TV another item. And I'm going to call this another item name, and it will be TV another item name. So where do we have that from? Well, from item another custom row. So here, this text view, it had this ID name. That's exactly the ID name that we use here, TV another item name. In order to use it, however, you can see we need to import it. So let's import that, and it will add a little row here at the top that allows us to use it. Now the card view item itself also needs to be changed. So I'm going to call this one card view another item, and it will take the card view underscore another item. And now we need to make sure that we are binding the right data to the right view holder. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the thing is, we want to make it dependent on our data model. So we need to make sure that the holder that is passed to us is of type ViewHolder. If that's not the case, then we can go ahead and do all of the magic that we did before. So let me paste that in there. Now, of course, the item will not be the item anymore, because back in the day, items, so the individual item that we're looking at, was just the item in our main activity list. So from this get items list, this was just a very basic list item. But now it's not anymore. It's actually from that data model. So if I want to get the item name, I need to get the item name from the data model itself. So here in our item adapter, instead of setting the text based on the item itself, we do that by saying item dot item name. So you can see we can get the view type as well as the item name from our item, because we are using the data model, which has item name and view type here. Now that works for ViewHolder. What is ViewHolder? Well, let's scroll down. It's this class here. So it's our RecyclerView ViewHolder, which was the TV item name and the view card view item. But how about another ViewHolder? So what if we want to use another ViewHolder? Well, then we need to do the same if statement for our else if holder is of type another ViewHolder. So now if it's another ViewHolder, well, then we need to run pretty much the same code, but with some variations. So now it's going to be not TV item, but TV another item name dot text, as well as it's not card view item, but it's card view another item. And the same goes here for this card view item at the bottom. Now at this point, you might think we're done, but the thing is, we need to know of which item view type we are, because we want to make changes based on our view type in our data model. So we need to create another function in here, which is going to take care of just that. So override fun get item view type, and that will run the get item view type super function. But that's not really what we want. We want it to return something for us. We want it to return items at the position, and we want to get the view type. So that's what this get item view type will return for us, which is basically this view type of the data that we're currently looking at. Now this was quite complicated, and you might wonder at that point, how is all of that connected to each other? Well, no worries, we're gonna get there in a bit. It's not too far off. So here in our main activity list, you can see when we pass get item list to our item adapter, it's not happy, because get item list is actually returning an array list, but our item adapter, if we look at it, is now expecting a data model. So it's not expecting a string as it did before, but it's expecting a data model. So just using get items list with array list string is not going to cut it. So we need to change that method. Let me override it real quick. You can see that we need to use get items list with data model. Now, of course, it doesn't know data model yet because we need to import it. So let's import that. as well as we need to create this item adapter.ViewType1 as well as ViewType2. So basically I created this list of 12 items of different view types, and those view types, they are not generated automatically, but we are basically passing manually what kind of view type we want to use. So do you want to use item custom row, or do you want to use item another custom row? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my item adapter, and I'm going to add a little companion object here, which is a very basic way to have different kind of view types for us. So view type 1 will take the value 1, and const val view type 2 is going to take the value of 2. So we basically declare the constant values inside of this companion object that we have here. Now at this point, if we go back to our main activity, you can see this error disappears. So we're just saying item adapter view type 1 or view type 2 are the ones that we're passing. So basically this is a clean way of using values. Of course, you could have just said 1 or 2 here. So you could have just passed it directly here. But what if we decide to change those values later on? Well, we don't want to have magic text here or magic numbers inside of our get item lists code. We want to have a clean way of having the data in the right manner. And that's what we did here by using this companion object and having those constant values. So now if we decide to add more view types in the future, we can do so very easily. So now there's just one last thing to do, because how do we know which view type we should display? Well, that should be created in the onCreateViewHolder or defined in the onCreateViewHolder. So let's go ahead and say if the view type is of type 1, then we want to do it as we did before. So we just want to return an item custom row, but else, or else if you want to be really sure, you would go ahead and say view type is the view type 2. So if that's the case, then we want to return the layout called item another custom row. Now at this point our IDE is complaining because our else if here, well, it generates a situation where we are not having a return statement for all the entries. And in this case, I'm just going to use else instead to make sure that this error disappears. But if you wanted to have multiple different entries, you could go ahead and create another else if, and then have a third type of layout. If you have a third type of layout, then you would also have to go down here to create another type of view holder. So the third view holder, for example, then you would have to adjust accordingly your companion object if you had the third type of view holder. And of course, you would need to create another XML file for the third type of view holders. And in the end, you would then have to go ahead and adjust your data here so that it also contains a third type of view holders. So this is actually something that I would recommend you try to do. So you try to create the third view type by yourself, and then you adjust the code so that it shows you 3 different types of view types. And well, by doing so, you will make sure that you really understood what you learned here, because just seeing this code and typing it out and trying it for yourself are 2 different things. So that's really something that I recommend you do. And at this point, there's only one thing that we need to change. And of course, it's the type of view holder that we are returning here. So now we're not returning the view holder, the generic one, but we are actually returning our another view holder, so to speak. Okay, so here, return another view holder for this to work. Now, of course, the onCreateViewHolder here cannot be just a basic view holder. It has to be a RecyclerView.viewHolder for this to work, because now we are saying, okay, we want to use the parent RecyclerView type of view holder for it to work for the view holder as well as for another view holder. Because if you look at it, both of those view holders, they are inheriting from RecyclerView view holder. And that's why we need to make sure that we are using the parent one so that we can use the children for the both cases. So this is a child of RecyclerView ViewHolder, as well as another ViewHolder is also a child from RecyclerView ViewHolder. So basically those two are siblings, and we need to make sure that we expect a parent in order to accept both types. So both sibling types in this case. So the ViewHolder as well as the another ViewHolder. Because, well, that's what we need to pass here, right? And if we're not passing the right type, then it won't work. And now we can go ahead and test that again. Item 1, ViewType 1, item 2, ViewType 2, item 3, ViewType 1, item 4, ViewType 2, and so forth. So now you can see how you can basically generate an application that uses different view types, and they are very flexible. So for example, in Facebook, some of them are just texts, some of them are videos, some of them are images, some of them are images with text, and so forth. So they have different types of view types. For example, some of them are ads, and those ads, they have a different design and so forth. And now you could go ahead and adjust your item custom row as well as your item another custom row and drag and drop some stuff in here. But you would have to make sure that all of those elements that you drag in here have an ID, as well as that they are added in your item adapter here at the very bottom, so that they are assigned correctly and displayed correctly for every single view holder, because we have different views. So every single item, so to speak, is a view, right? So now you have seen how everything comes together. So basically in the main activity, we went ahead and we created the combination or the connection between a recycler view with its layout style, and in this case, the linear layout manager, then the item adapter that we created, and we assigned that item adapter to the recycler view, which is our linear layout manager recycler view. So basically it's the one in the activity main. So this one here. Then we created individual items, or those rows that we will have. So in our case, we created 2 of them. Then we made sure that we have a data model, which allows to create different view types, because we have different types. We gave it a name as well as a type. Then we have this item adapter, which inherits from RecyclerView adapter, RecyclerView ViewHolder. We pass it a list, which is our data model. And that's a cool thing. Now you could go ahead and use a very different data model. And based on whatever data model you're using, you could pass in the data. And where does it come from? Well, in our case, it comes from this get items list. And you could just modify this method in order to take the data from the web, from an XML file, or whatever you are using there. And you of course need to make sure that your item adapter has the correct settings for your onCreate view holder, or your onBind view holder, as well as your inner classes for the different view holder types that you have. So I'd say at this point, you know pretty much everything that you need to know to create your very own recycler views and lists and all the good stuff. All right, if you made it this far, then you know how to create recycler views at this point, and then you know how to connect the different parts and basically create your very own types of list items and so forth. So this is really an important integral part of being an Android developer and writing great apps or developing great apps. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It is a long one, but I wanted to make sure that we are covering everything that you need to know regarding view holders and recycler views, and basically creating these different kinds of list views, so to speak. All right, so I hope to see you in one of those videos, and if you made it this far, then I hope I deserve a like, because, well, otherwise you wouldn't have stayed for so long, I guess. And also don't forget to subscribe. Okay, so I hope to see you in the other videos. Have a nice day.